let's get started. I've gone and created a new Unity project and I saved my scene. And what I want to do now is just bring in a few files that will be part of this project. So the first folder that I want to bring in is the VR standard assets folder from a different project. And these are all files that come in the VR samples scenes project of Unity. So that includes the reticle, VR, iRaycaster, and a few other files. So I'm going to bring that into our project. And this comes with a few things that I've placed in here, and all of these things come from the VR sample scenes that can be downloaded from the asset store. Another folder that I'm going to bring in is the Zenva VR folder, which consists on tools that I've developed over previous courses that we can use as well. And I need to bring in some additional files into this script folder that were part of a previous project. So I'm going to bring in the teleportation files in case we wanted to use that. So I'm going to bring those scripts in, and also a prefab for the teleportation pods. So that would be this one here. So I'm also going to copy that onto this folder here, prefabs, and there might be some error here, and that is because we need to because things changed folders. We just need to select the correct script, and there we go. So we've got things imported that we wanted to use. And as part of these things that come here, there is a VR camera prefab that I'm going to use instead of this main camera. So I'm going to go and delete that main camera and bring in this camera here. And all this camera does, it is the default camera in all aspects, except for the fact that it has already the scripts added, the scripts that come from Unity, so that we can have a reticle going, and it already has the input support, and it has this drag camera script that allows me to use the mouse to move my camera. All right, so now that we have that in place, I'm going to go and add a ground here. So I'm going to go and add a plane, and I'm going to make sure that the plane is in the origin. Let's scale it up a little bit, maybe by 4. And well, it doesn't matter why. Okay, so we've got a bigger plane now, and also I'm gonna move my camera just up a position of somewhere like 1.5, something like that. So we are not right on the floor, and that is all that I'm gonna do for now. Now, before we start working on our draggable component, I wanna explain how that component will work. So I'm gonna bring up this node, and let's think how a dragging component should work. So this is us, and there will be an object here that we want to be able to move. And the way for us to move that object will be by using our reticle. So if you're familiar with the VR sample scenes that comes with Unity, we have a VR raycaster component, and that also has our reticle there. And our object can react to this action of looking at it. So we have the over event. So once we have that on over, we could do something, but more important than over, we have click. The way that we want this to work is that you look at the object and you click on it, and then once you click on it, it will follow your reticle basically. So, or your VR raycaster. So it will, if you move up, if you look up, this object, if you're dragging it, it will go with you. And once you click again, you are going to release it, to cut that bound, and it will stay in that position. So that is the basics of how this will work. And now a couple of things that this reticle, that this draggable component will need. When we are dragging something, we are going to keep it at a certain distance. So whenever we are dragging something, it will be kept at a certain distance of our camera. even if it was a bit further or a bit closer, once we are moving it around, it will be at a certain distance. So we're gonna call this camera distance. It will be a variable in our script. And then something else that we need to define is how far away can we grab this object. For example, if the cube is really far away, should we still be able to grab it? Maybe not. Maybe it would be a bit unrealistic that you look at something in the horizon and you can lift it up. So we will set a maximum distance as well. So we will set a, let's call this max grab distance. So it is the maximum distance at which we can grab something. So we will have these two as public variables that we can define. And our object itself, since we are going to be using the VR raycaster or the VR input events, it needs to be a VR interactive object item, VR interactive item. So we need to add that component to it. That component is part of the VR standard assets that Unity provides. Now, our component will have different states. And depending on the state that you are in, you will be able to do one thing or another. So there will be an initial state that is called ready. And when our object is ready, it means that we can grab it. Then we will, once we start moving it, we will be dragging it. So when we are dragging it, is when it will follow you around. So if you look around, it will follow you. And then once you finish dragging, you basically send it back to ready. And there will be another state that we will define, which is we're going to be called blocked. So if an object is blocked, it means that you cannot drag it. So that is just something that you might want to have. For example, imagine that you have some puzzle game and all of a sudden there is something happening in the scene, like something you have to look at, and then all the bits are blocked. You can't really grab them until that event finishes. So think of a cutscene, for example, that somehow the game needs to stop and you maybe have to pay attention to what's happening somewhere else. Or imagine that there's some sort of switch and you have to press that switch, and once that switch is pressed, then you can start dragging. So we need to have that blocking option as well. So this is the very basic of it. And there is one more thing that we will address, which is what happens when you have two of these elements that can be dragged. For example, there is one there and there is one there. This is a different one. And then all of a sudden you are dragging this one and you're moving here. Should you be able to drag both of them, or maybe that can get a bit confusing. So we need to address that that case as well, which is when there are multiple elements. So this is the basics, and now let's go and create this component in Visual Studio. So I'm going to switch back to Unity, and in my assets folder, I'm going to go and create a new folder called scripts. And inside of the scripts folder, I will add my script, which is going to be called Draggable. And I'm going to open that up in Visual Studio. Inside of this script, the first thing that I will do is use my Zenva VR namespace so that we can easily use this in the future as part of this Zenva VR library that you are welcome to use in whichever way you want. So we're going to start by doing that by placing, whoops, this actually should be in the outside, so my bad. All right, so there we go. So we said that we were going to have a couple of public variables, which were this camera distance and a maximum grabbing distance. So let's begin by doing the easiest part, which is to define those variables. So this is the distance from the camera when dragging. So when you are dragging, public float, and this is called camera distance. So we will have that, and we can give it a default value of 1 Unity unit. And then we have the maximum distance for grabbing. So this will be public float max grab distance. And I'm going to set that as 2 Unity units. You can adjust that if you want. Then we said that this needed to have a VR interactive item component so that we could access all of these things. And for that, we can use the required component just to make sure that it is always there. And in here, we have to type of VR interactive item. And you will see that this gives you an error because we have to include the VR standard assets library utils namespace, and now we can access that class name. Since we will be getting this component, we might as well create a private variable for it. So VR interactive item component. This will be VR interactive item, VR interactive. And we will grab this. I'm going to start by deleting all these methods and then we can add them as we need them. We will grab this on awake. So at the very beginning, when the script is initialized, we will use the get component method, specify the type of the component. Definitely add the execution brackets. So this is to grab our VR interactive item component. Cool, so we've got that. What else did we say that we needed? We talked about states. We said that we were going to have all these different states here: ready, dragging, and blocked. So let's go and create those. For that, I will be using states here. We will be using the enum keyword to create a set of values. So we will have ready, we will have dragging, and we will have blocked. So in that way, we can then define the current state. And the current state is of type state. And it will be called current state, like so. And in awake, we can just assume that they're not going to be blocked by default. We can say that it's not an assumption, it's basically definition. We can define that they will be ready by default. So start as ready, current state equals state dot ready. And then something else that we will need. So in case this will be relevant, this might be relevant depending on the use of this component, but sometimes you might want to send the element back to its original position. For example, if we think of a puzzle, we place all the pieces on the puzzle, and if the puzzle is not correct, then those pieces should go back to their original position. So keeping track of their original position is something that we definitely want to do. So what I will do for that is keep track of their initial position, and I will save that as a vector3. I'm going to call that initial position, like so, initial position, and save that at in the awake method. So save the initial position. So this is initial pos equals transform dot position. And if you wanted to keep track of to keep the original rotation as well, so that you can send them back and they have exactly the same orientation that they originally had, we can also save it in this manner. Rotation is of type quaternion. Quaternions are a mathematical structure to store rotation values. So I will save this as initial rotation and save it here. Save initial rotation. Initial rotation equals transform.rotation. So there we go. We got a few things saved. But now is when we actually need to implement the behavior of this, which is that when we click on this element, we should be able to move it around, and then once we click again, we should be able to release it. So we know that we can access the VR interactive items events, and there's the event that we care about is on click. So when we enable this component on enable, we need to hook onto this event. So I'm going to type VR interactive dot on click, and I have to add a method to this event so that when that event is triggered, we call the method. And the method will be called handle click, so that it is clear what it does. It takes care of when you click. Visual Studio complains because we haven't defined that method. So I'm going to go and press Control dot and generate that method for me. So we've got our method there. I'm going to delete private because that is my personal coding preference with C#. You can leave it if you prefer to have it. Now, whenever we hook onto an event, when we enable the object, we should also release that once we disable the object. So I'm going to go here and replace this by disable and replace this by a minus sign, so that when we disable the object, we are no longer hooked onto this event. So this is where the action actually is going to take place. And in here we will it will depend on the state that we have. So I'm gonna first write this pseudocode of how this will work, and then we can implement it. So if it's ready, and by ready I mean ready, we start dragging. Then once we are dragging, so once we go into here, we also have to check the distance. So check that it's not too far, because if we are further away from this maximum grabbing distance, which is that distance here, we should not be able to grab our object. So that is something that also that we have to check for. And everything could be done on a single if statement, but I will just do it in two separate statements here. And then if we are able to drag, then we should set the state to dragging, right? And that's it. And maybe keep a that's actually all that we need. So I'm going to start by doing that. So if the current state is equal to state.ready, so if we are ready, then we will check that we're not too far away. So we're going to check the distance between the camera, which is our player in virtual reality, and the game object. So let's define that as a float distance, dist, and then we can use vector3.distance between two locations. One of the locations is transform.position, and the other location is our player, which we can access by typing camera.main.transform.position. Remember that the camera the camera has this main camera here, main camera tag, if that is by default. So if we leave that, we can access it in this manner, and we will do that. All right, so that gives us the distance. So now we have to check whether that distance is, if the distance is greater than this than our maximum grabbing distance, then we should just return so that nothing happens. So if we got this far, it means that we are close enough, and therefore we have to set the state, change the state to state.dragging, so that now we can check that we are dragging, and that's it, so all this is going to do is change the state, and we can print for now we're going to print start dragging here. So let's go and try something in Unity, and then I will give you a challenge for the rest of that particular part. So what I'm going to do here is go and add a 3D object. It's going to be a cube, and I'm going to place it. Let's make this a position that there so that we can see. Well, we can tell that the square is there. Everything looks white, but that's fine. So I'm going to press play, and I can move around. Let's turn the statistics off. So I can move around, and if I click, so let's just to show you, I am looking at this cube. So if I click, well, I'm not getting anything. So let's see, maybe the distance is, maybe they are too far away. So let's go and bring this much closer and see if we can do it now. Oh, well, we didn't give it the draggable script. That is a mistake that I do quite often. So let's go and drag the script to cube and try one more time. So let's press play, and and click on that, and also make sure that it is close enough, so it's really close. And there we go. So we get that start dragging on the console. And what's also important is that we just get it once, so we don't get it again, because after we get it for the first time, we have set the state, and therefore this code will not be executed. So we still need to complete the rest of this if statement or another condition down here. So I'm going to give you a challenge for you to solve. So the challenge is that when clicking, if we were currently dragging the object, release it. So at the moment, we're not really dragging anything, but we are working with the state. So that is what you have to look at. We're currently able to start dragging, and what you have to implement here is so that we can release it. All right, so pause the video and have a go at this challenge, and then come back and I will show you the solution. All right, welcome back. I hope that you solved the challenge, but if not, that is perfectly fine. And I'm going to show you the solution now. So what we're going to have, what we are going to have here, I'm first gonna write it in pseudocode, and then I'm gonna write the code itself. So if it's being dragged, so if it's dragging, then we will release. So else if current state equals state dot dragging. If that is the case, then we simply have to stop dragging. So we're going to set the state to ready again. So current state equals state dot ready, and we're going to print released, and go back to Unity and make sure that this thing is closer, and press play. And I'm going to, well, let's, yeah, we got it there. Start dragging, yep, press again, released, start dragging, released, start dragging, released. Sweet, so we've got that working. And there was another state that is that it is blocked. But if you think about it, if it's blocked, none of it is going to be executed. So if it's blocked, this simply will never be executed. So we don't really need to add blocked in here. So now what's missing is actually to actually drag this around, and that is going to be implemented using the update method, so that if we are dragging, we are going to be moving this element. So I'm going to add that method here, update, and in update, we're only going to care about the state dragging. So if let's write it in pseudocode first. So check that we are dragging, and if that's the case, simply set the position. Set the position at this distance here, at camera distance. At camera distance, and also make sure that the orientation needs to be. We're gonna make it. Well, actually, we'll keep the orientation as it is, and we'll just move its position. So let's go and add that. So if the current state is equal to state.dragging, then we need to set the position of the camera, and it just to have a line that is that's not too long. I'm first gonna grab the camera in a variable. So I'm gonna type camera camera.main, or we are gonna end up with a really long line of code. And in here, what we will do is change the transform, change the position of the current game object, and the new position will be the position of the camera. So let's grab the transform of the camera here. Transform camera, transform camera.main.transform, like so. So the new position is the position of the camera plus the I'll show you in this manner. So we've got our camera like so. So the new position of the piece is the position of the camera, and then the forward direction, which is where we are looking at, and this distance is this camera distance. This is camera distance. So we need to grab the position here and add. So the new the position of the game object is equal to the camera position plus the camera forward vector times that distance. That's distance here. So that as we move up or down, it is always positioned at that distance from us, exactly where we're looking at. So that means we got the position there, and then we need to get that forward direction. So camera transform dot forward, and the forward vector has a length of 1. So to get the distance, we need to multiply it by our camera distance. So that this is a unitary vector, and then we multiply by the actual distance. In this case, it is 1, but it could be any other number. And that's it. That should do it. So let's go to Unity and have a go. So I'm gonna go look at this, click, and now I can move. It is looking a little bit strange, and it's hard to see because it's all white. So maybe we should set a distance that is a little bit more than 1. So let's go. Let's set it in here in the editor. So that distance, let's say that the distance is 3, and we'll set also the grabbing distance to 3. So let's try one more time. So we've got the reticle there, and there we go. So we are able to move this element now. And so we could position this as anywhere that we want, and then if we release, we leave it at that point. And we could make it so that it's always facing us, and that could be done by doing the following. So we could just say that where is this in update as well? So we could also set make it face us. It could be done by typing transform.look at camera transform.position. So if we add that and try one more time, it is always facing at us, and we can leave it again like before. We can drag it and, for example, put it there. Whoops, there we go. All right, so we've got this working, and we will be adding more things, but this is the basic of it. And just a hint of what I would also like to have here. Just like we have these events with our VR interactive item, I would also like the draggable component to create its own events so that other elements can hook onto the events. For example, when you drop something, or when you start dragging something, I would be able to hook onto those events. So that is something that we need to add later, but this is the basics of a draggable component.